Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Canada's Speaker of the House may be in hot water again. Political reporter Brian Lilly will explain why. The International Criminal Court is seeking arrest warrants for those in the Israeli government for alleged crimes against humanity. We have reaction. And it appears as though Israel is winning in its fight against Hamas in Gaza. We have an update from TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. U.S. President Joe Biden blasted the International Criminal Court chief prosecutor's announcement that he's seeking arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders. The ICC wants to charge them with war crimes and crimes against humanity. Biden said, quote, "Let me be clear, whatever the prosecutor might imply, there is no equivalence, none, between Israel and Hamas." Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, meanwhile, has so far stayed silent on the ICC wanting to prosecute top Israeli officials. The ICC also said they may seek arrest warrants as well for a couple of Hamas leaders for their parts in the October 7th attacks, which left around 1,200 people dead. Now, to chat about these potential arrest warrants in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us from the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles. Lisa, what would happen if the International Criminal Court was able to be successful in landing arrest warrants? Would anything actually happen? I mean, how much clout do they have on the world stage?
Nothing. Really, this is more symbolic in nature than anything else. Hence, maybe that's why he made the announcement on CNN. Right, and made the announcement before traveling to Israel, where the head of the ICC was scheduled to go in order to investigate. So imagine making these types of accusations, targeting and putting on the same footing the leaders of in Israel with a terrorist organization, Hamas. And as you pointed to, the fact that this really means nothing. Israel is not part of that. It wouldn't even, if they maybe perhaps traveled, they would be able to be arrested. But this is, it's very far down the line and very far-fetched, frankly.
Now, a big story recently was how Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi, along with his foreign minister, were killed in a helicopter crash. At this point, what do we know what caused the crash?
No, they're actually investigating, and I'm sure they will. I mean, who knows what they're going to come out and say? Probably blame Israel or the CIA or one of the usual conspiracy theories. Many point to the fact that it was incredibly foggy and mountainous terrain, which made it very challenging for his helicopter to make a safe landing, and that's why we saw what we saw. But the reason why there is speculation is, first of all, we're dealing with the Islamic Republic, in which anything goes, right? It's a terrorist regime. But secondly, he was on the short list of those who would succeed the supreme leader. The other would be his own son. So many think that there was maybe a target on his head, but again, others are in fact pointing to the fog and the fact that helicopters don't really do well in the fog. Also, I might be honest to point out that this helicopter was incredibly old, over 45 to 50 years old, and it was a helicopter that was purchased by the Shah's government and not by this government. So it was an incredibly old helicopter with old technology, and that perhaps could have lent a hand also to the crash.
So, Lisa, outside of Iran, it doesn't appear as though many here in the West will really be mourning the Iranian president's death. I mean, he was apparently known as a butcher in the brutal crackdown of anti-regime protesters and allegedly had around 30,000 of his own people killed.
He has so much blood on his hands. He's not someone who's worthy of condolences, but yet you did see the UN and other places giving moments of silence and offering condolences. Here in the United States, there were condolences offered, and then they backtracked and made it more clear. I saw on Twitter over the last 24 hours where many made the comparison, would we do condolences or a moment of silence for Nazis? And that's what the comparison here is, because he, in fact, not only is a symbolic figure of the regime in Iran, but also by his own right is, condemned as a butcher because of the number of executions that he ordered.
Thanks so much, Lisa. That was Lisa Daftari, host of the Foreign Desk, joining us from Los Angeles. You know, it appears as though the Israeli government has shut down a live feed from Associated Press showing a view of the war in Gaza. Apparently, government officials also seized equipment from AP as well. We have more now in this report.
Israeli officials seized a camera and broadcasting equipment belonging to the Associated Press in southern Israel, accusing the news organization of violating a new media law by providing images to Al Jazeera. The AP live feed captured the moment officials disconnected the microphone.
You see?
Yeah. Israeli government officials presented AP journalists a piece of paper alleging that it was violating the country's new foreign broadcaster law, which shut down Al Jazeera's operations in Israel in early May. They then took the equipment away. The Associated Press denounced the move by Israel, calling it an abusive use of the new law. Quote, "The Associated Press decries in the strongest terms the actions of the Israeli government to shut down our long-standing live feed showing a view into Gaza and seize AP equipment. The AP's live shot has generally shown smoke rising over the territory. It complies with Israel's rules prohibiting broadcasts of details like troop movements that could endanger soldiers." Israel's Ministry of Communications also released footage showing an Al Jazeera broadcast of the AP live feed. Al Jazeera is among thousands of clients that receive live video feeds from the AP and other news organizations.
Management at Associated Press, needless to say, decried the actions of the Israeli government in the strongest terms. AP's executive editor Julie Pace explains why.
This shutdown was not based on the content of the feed, but rather an abusive use by the Israeli government of the country's new foreign broadcaster law. The live shot has generally shown smoke rising over Gaza. We comply with Israel's rules prohibiting broadcasts of details like troop movements that could endanger soldiers. We urge the Israeli government to return our equipment and enable us to reinstate our live feed immediately so we can continue to provide this important visual journalism to thousands of media outlets around the world.
TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto has been covering the war in Gaza. He says the Israel Defense Forces have been gaining the upper hand against Hamas following more than half a year of intense fighting with the terrorist group in the Gaza Strip.
Even after 7 months of hard fighting in which the IDF has eliminated thousands of Hamas fighters and confiscated enormous amounts of weapons, ammunition, and cash, Hamas has still managed to keep up the fight and bring in fresh supplies. Now, that might be about to change. During the last few days, soldiers from the 401st Brigade have been hard at work in the eastern neighborhoods of Rafah, eliminating approximately 50 terrorists and finding dozens of terror tunnels and shafts, which are in process of being mapped and demolished. This city is a major epicenter of terrorist activities, but it's also a major center of criminal activity, including the smuggling of weapons, narcotics, people, cash, and other contraband.
Donald Trump's lawyers have rested their defense in the former president's New York hush money trial. This brings the case one step closer to final arguments. We have more now in this report.
Now, most notably, former President Trump did not take the stand, did not testify in his own defense. Trump had long said that he wanted to testify, that he wanted to take these allegations of a hush money scheme and reimbursements that were labeled as legal expenses, he wanted to take them head on. But ultimately, he and his lawyers decided that he would not testify.
It's a kangaroo court. There's never been anything like this that I've ever seen. Now, I had 2 other trials that were kangaroo courts also. It's stacked up.
Closing arguments in the case won't be heard until next Tuesday. That's the day after Memorial Day. Now, the judge says that once he gives those instructions, it'll take about an hour, and then deliberations could start as early as next Wednesday.
It appears as though the House of Commons Speaker is in trouble yet again, this time over partisan language that was used to promote an event. Political reporter Brian Lilly explains why he feels Greg Fergus is in the wrong.
Look, he's an MP like every other MP. Yes, he's the Speaker, but he still has to fundraise to be able to run a campaign come next election, and speakers have done this in the past. But the language promoting this event made Pierre Poilievre sound like the devil incarnate. And he, this is not the language the Speaker should be using. You can easily sell out a fundraiser without using over-the-top language to describe your opponents. But Pierre Poilievre would ruin healthcare. He would strip away your rights. All these things that we're talking about.
Mr. Lilly will also have details on how it appears as though the Trudeau government is now backing away from its big promise of the capital gains tax changes in the latest budget. He'll explain coming up in the second half of our program. Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says her government's new budget will include help for our country's healthcare system. She says this will be done as Ottawa increases the federal health transfer by around 5% per year until 2027-2028 fiscal year. It'll be done through annual top-up payments.
It's going to mean shorter wait times for surgeries and in the emergency room. It's going to make it easier to see a doctor or a nurse practitioner so all Canadians can get the care they need when and where they need it. We know that these are real priorities for Canadians across the country, and that is why I would really like to take this opportunity to urge our fellow MPs to pass the Budget Implementation Act as soon as possible.
Things are looking mighty green here in southwestern Alberta, thanks to all of the rain we've seen lately. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though the rain clouds may be sticking around a little longer.
Yes, and not only that, but we could see a risk of some thunderstorms this evening along with that moisture. So we're looking at 30% chance of showers this evening with the risk of a thunderstorm. Into Wednesday, we can double that chance of showers up to 60% chance. Also winds tonight, not too bad, fairly light the way that they were earlier today, 20 kilometers per hour. Into Wednesday, though, we're going to see more gusty winds along with that moisture, so 20 to 40 kilometer per hour winds. Overnight low 5 degrees, up to 12 degrees tomorrow, which is still fairly low, however, still seasonable for this time of year. We're still sticking in that range. Now, as for the rest of the week, I will be back later in the show to tell you how the week is shaping up. Hal?
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Thanks to a lot of our moisture our province has received, evacuation alerts have ended for a number of communities in the Wood Buffalo region by Fort McMurray. Many residents in the Beacon Hill, Prairie Creek, and Grayling Terrace areas have been allowed to return home. Fire officials say the construction of fire guards have been completed between the northern edge of the fire and Fort McMurray. That helped prevent the wildfire from moving closer to the community and Highway 63. Structure protection remains in place, and officials say crews have completed spraying land-based fire retardant in the forested areas that border some of the evacuated neighborhoods. The City of Lethbridge recently passed first reading of its water rationing action plan, which includes a reduction target of 5% if the water in the Old Man Reservoir drops below 25% for more than a week. The current level is around 43%, which is well below where it normally sits, which is between 63% and 85%. As part of an effort to conserve water ahead of any mandated water restrictions, the town of Coaldale voted to get ahead of the game and implement a rain barrel rebate program. The manager of government relations for the town of Coaldale explains how it works.
So basically, it's just a program that'll be administered through the website or in person at the town office. So you can submit an online application or fill out a paper application. And basically how it works is you purchase a rain barrel, whether it be a local retailer or through a rain barrel company that manufactures and sells them exclusively online. And then you come into the town or you go on the website and you fill out an application form for the rebate and you submit a receipt to show proof of purchase. And you can have up to 50% to a maximum of $50 in terms of a rebate for that rain barrel.
And more details on the rebate rain barrel program are available on the Town of Coaldale's website. Alberta Social Services Minister Jason Nixon announced funding support on Tuesday for a historic home for people with disabilities. Nixon says the government is investing over $300,000 into Joey's Home, a permanent supportive housing project for those living with disabilities. The name is in honor of Joey Moss, who worked with both the Oilers and Elks for more than 30 years. Moss passed away in 2020 at the age of 57.
Despite facing challenges as a person with Down syndrome, Joey never let it define him. He used his platform to raise awareness for individuals with disabilities, to break down barriers and foster acceptance and understanding of people with diverse abilities. And today I'm excited to announce the government of Alberta wants to build on Joey's legacy right here Through our Affordable Housing Partnership Program, Alberta will be investing $340,000 to the Winford Stewart Association to build permanent supportive housing here in Edmonton. This investment will create 5 new units at Joey's House Mindful Hearts Memory Care Centre, which has provided essential services for Albertans with diverse abilities since 2007.
Nixon says Joey's home will provide 17 specialized housing units for those with dementia-related challenges and intellectual disabilities. The Alberta NDP spoke out about what they say is the UCP's failure to address concerns which resulted in what they call a motel medicine crisis. A report detailed how a man paralyzed on his left side following a stroke and who uses a wheelchair was transferred to a Travelodge motel in Leduc. The patient, 62-year-old Blair Caniff, has been a patient at the Royal Alex Hospital in Edmonton for 6 months when a social worker told him he was being moved. Caniff said he expected to be moved into a long-term care facility. Alberta NDP health critic Dr. Luann Metz says the province really needs to do better when it comes to Albertans' healthcare needs.
The Minister of Community and Social Services said, "This isn't my problem." What's even more alarming is that this was brought to the attention of Minister Nixon and Minister LaGrange in January of this year, 2 full months before the news of Mr. Caniff being placed in a motel for care was reported to Albertans.
HS spokesperson Christy Bland said it's important hospital beds and resources are used for patients with acute care needs. Lethbridge police have a man in custody following a high-risk incident on Tuesday afternoon at a residence along the 3000 block of 20th Avenue South. Police say the man, who had previously barricaded himself inside of the Southside home, surrendered to police. He was wanted on outstanding warrants. Bridge City News spoke off camera to a woman who claimed to be a renter of the home and said it was her son inside, and said it was a neighbor who had called police claiming there were guns inside of the home. The woman refuted that fact, and police have yet to confirm. We'll have more details to the story as they become available. 4 talented young hockey players have been drafted by the Lethbridge Hurricanes Hockey Club. The players come from Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg. Peter Anholt, Hurricanes general manager, says all of these young men are going to be important pieces for the hockey club moving forward.
Adding good players, and we've done that again here today, and we'll continue to add good players to our group. But and I think when you look at our team and our organization, we wanted to add some center icemen. We added that in tie with our first pick, and we added another real quality center iceman with our 4th pick. And I think anytime you can build, from the goaltending through the defense and through the middle, I think that's the idea here.
Find success is just winning. I mean, I love to win. I'm sure everyone here loves to win as well. So, success comes from winning, but also for me, a big part of success is helping my teammates out. I'm a guy that loves to make my teammates better and just help them achieve their goals as well. So that's kind of success to me.
I believe that, a big focus this summer is definitely working on offensive puck handling and some moves on the blue line. But a huge thing is I always want to focus on providing the defense that our team will need.
Yeah, it's great. At the end of the day, that was really the biggest thing for me, is going to a team that had high hopes for me and it was high on me. So I think it was great to go to Lethbridge.
It's a special day. It's especially for all of us and the Lethbridge Hurricanes. I feel like all of us were really excited, and it's just such a great day.
The Lethbridge Hurricanes were swept by the Swift Current Broncos in the first round of this year's WHL playoffs. And then there was one Canadian team left in the NHL playoffs after the Edmonton Oilers beat the Vancouver Canucks 3-2, taking their best-of-7 affair 4-3. Both coaches weighed in on what they saw in the series. The Oilers will now go on to face the Dallas Stars for the Western Conference Final beginning Wednesday in Dallas. The winner of that series will play for the Stanley Cup. You know, I've been seeing more and more kids playing street hockey in my neighborhood, even with the moisture we've seen lately. We've seen quite a bit of rain over the past few days, and the rain clouds may be sticking around a little while longer. Full weather details are on deck. Many in our agricultural communities have been enjoying the rain we've been receiving lately across much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details, including the long-range forecast. Jeanette, how long will all of this moisture last?
Yeah, well, we could see a chance of showers this evening along with the risk of a thunderstorm. More showers tomorrow as we get into Wednesday, 60% chance up to 12 degrees, and then periods of rain lasting through Wednesday evening. After that, though, we are seeing sun and cloud throughout the rest of the week. Those showers could come back and visit us on Thursday night and then again on Saturday night, but throughout the day, we're seeing mostly dry conditions. Up to 14 on Thursday, 17 for a high both Friday and Saturday. Sunday, we're looking at a high of 19 degrees and then back up to the 20s as we get into next Monday, high of 22 degrees with partly cloudy skies. So like I was saying earlier, those seasonal averages have actually increased a little bit. We're looking at now at average highs of 19 degrees, average low 5 degrees. We're pretty much sticking in that range. And now the record high on this day happened back in 1980. It was 31 degrees. -3 was the record low for this day, happening in 2001. 5:38, that's when the sun rose this morning, and 9:19 is our sunset this evening, giving us 15 hours and 41 minutes of daylight. 10 minutes more daylight than we saw on Friday before the long weekend. Okay, so on the west coast tomorrow, we are seeing early morning showers in both Victoria and Vancouver, 15 for a high in both of those cities, 12 for the high in Edmonton tomorrow, expecting some afternoon showers. Calgary, quite a bit of rain tomorrow, 5 to 10 millimeters expected, 9 for a high there. And as we get into Saskatchewan, we are seeing weather statements in effect for this evening. The possibility of funnel clouds is possible for both Saskatoon and Regina, both of those cities seeing risk of thunderstorms tonight and some showers lasting into tomorrow in Saskatoon, high of 10 degrees, and then a mix of sun and cloud in Regina, 15. Also fog developing overnight. We could see that fog dissipating in the morning as it starts to warm up there. 16 is the expected high tomorrow in Winnipeg, looking at a 30% chance of showers. And then as we get into the central part of the country, as we move on over there, 40% chance of showers in Toronto is expected. Same thing for Ottawa, seeing a risk of thunderstorms as well. These areas also very high humidity. 29 for a high in Ottawa, 27 the expected high in Toronto. An expected high tomorrow of 30 degrees in Montreal, going to be a warm one. Fredericton, we're looking at a high of 28 degrees of humidex there, 31. Looking at showers tomorrow, clear skies in Halifax, high of 27. Much cooler by the coast as you go to parts along the water there, more like 14 degrees. So that's the place to stay if you don't like the heat. Charlottetown seeing some showers and 24 for a high. 16 for a high in St. John's, but 10 along parts of the coast there with partly cloudy skies. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The annual inflation rate dropped to 2.7%. That's a 0.2% drop from March. Stats Canada says services and durable goods led the slowdown. Grocery prices, meanwhile, actually rose at a modest pace of 1.4% from a year ago. Higher prices at the pumps moderated deacceleration. Today's inflation figures are expected to play a key role in the Bank of Canada's interest rate decision coming up on June the 5th. The folks behind the Loblaw boycott are planning to keep the movement going past May. Organizer Emily Johnson says they will focus on advocacy efforts in the months ahead. Plans initially formed for a boycott after a Reddit group created a page to vent and talk about high grocery prices, attracting tens of thousands of members. Loblaw has pushed back, saying it is not responsible for higher food prices. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 2 points on the day to finish at 22,468. The Dow was up 66 points to 39,872. The S&P 500 was up 13 to 5321, and the Nasdaq was up 37 points to finish at 16,832. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 54 cents to 79.26 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 9 cents to $2.66 US. Gold was down $4.26 to $2,421.05 US an ounce, and silver was up 15 cents to $31.98 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.44 per bushel, barley is at $6.38, canola is at $14.01, and corn is at $7.87 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was up $1.50 to $182.98. Feeder cattle were up $2.25 to $248.95. Lean hogs were down 53 cents to $96.40, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.26 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says her government's new budget will include help for our country's healthcare system. She says this will be done as Ottawa increases the federal health transfer by around 5% per year until the 2027-2028 budget year. It will be done through annual top-up payments. Federal political reporter Brian Lilly says there appears to be more fear-mongering coming from the Trudeau government, where Liberal MPs are claiming that everyone's rights are at stake if Canadians vote for the Conservatives in next year's federal election. Mr. Lilly will have more details for us momentarily. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. The Trudeau government took to social media recently to push the message that your rights are in danger if a Pierre Poilievre government is elected. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, we've heard the fear-mongering from the Liberals before, especially when it comes to abortion, but now they're claiming that everyone's rights are at stake?
Yeah, and they've been pushing the abortion message this month as well. Make no mistake about it. The month of May, the month of Mother's Day, is the month that the Liberals always go hard on abortion. Happy Mother's Day. Let's celebrate abortion. It's a very odd concept for me. But, you know, on the Thursday before Mother's Day, there's always the March for Life on Parliament Hill. You've been there. You've covered that. It's normally the biggest peaceful protest on Parliament Hill each and every year. And it's not treated well by most people in the media. And so the Liberals spend the week leading up to the March for Life and the week after going on and on and on about abortion. And this year's no different. They seem to be extending it, though. I mean, Justin Trudeau went to New Brunswick last week and was talking all about how I believe it's Clinic 554, and I might have the numbers wrong, but I believe it's Clinic 554, is no longer being funded. And that's a national disgrace. Well, it's a private clinic. And the New Brunswick government says they don't need the private clinic to provide the services required by the Canada Health Act. But, you know, the Trudeau Liberals, who are all against private clinics delivering public health care, if it's to replace your cataracts, Hal, or replace your knee or your mother's knee or what have you, are suddenly all about private clinics when it comes to abortion. So, yeah, they played up that part. But this year, it's something different. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I'm sure we talked about it at the time, Pierre Poilievre spoke to the Canadian Police Association, and he was discussing dangerous offenders and multiple murderers being in medium security prisons or having their sentences overturned, like Alexandre Bissonnette, the man who carried out the Quebec City mosque attack. He was given 6 consecutive life sentences. And the Supreme Court upheld a lower court decision that said that's cruel and unusual punishment. You cannot actually give somebody a sentence that long. And Poilievre said, you know what? I don't care. I think that multiple murderers, dangerous offenders should be in maximum security. And if you're like this guy, you should only come out of prison in a box. And we'll pass laws and we'll use whatever tools the Constitution gives us to make sure they stay. That's a hint to the notwithstanding clause. So they're talking about multiple murderers, and the Liberals are saying that threatening to keep multiple murderers in jail means they're coming for your rights. As much as I'm a critic of the Liberal Party of Canada, Hal, I don't think that their core constituency, their core voting base, is a bunch of multiple murderers and dangerous offenders. I think that they're on the wrong side of the Canadian public on this. I think they're on the wrong side of many of their own voters on this. And it's a desperate attempt to try and stay relevant, to try and say to Canadians, hey, vote for us, or you're going to have all your rights stripped away by this guy that wants to keep murderers in jail.
Brian, the Speaker of the House of Commons is in hot water yet again, this time over partisan language promoting an event. What did Greg Fergus do now?
So the Liberals have a section on their website that advertises all of their upcoming fundraising events. They call it part of their open government policy. I mean, they won't tell you what the government's actually doing, but they'll tell you when their fundraising events are. And there was one for Speaker Fergus. Look, he's an MP like every other MP. Yes, he's the Speaker, but he still has to fundraise to be able to run a campaign come next election. And speakers have done this in the past. But the language promoting this event made Pierre Poilievre sound like the devil incarnate. And he, this is not the language the Speaker should be using. You can easily sell out a fundraiser without using over-the-top language to describe your opponents. But Pierre Poilievre would, ruin healthcare. He would strip away your rights. All these things that we're talking about. This is what was in the language to promote this. And so Chris Workington, Conservative MP from Alberta, up north of Edmonton Way, he raised the issue and he's like, hey, wait a minute. Like, this is the third partisan event you've had. This is, another example of you not being the nonpartisan voice for the whole Commons, which is what the Speaker should be. And one of the people on the front bench that sits just down from Pierre Poilievre on the Conservative benches is former leader and former House Speaker Andrew Scheer. Now, people can think what they will about Andrew Scheer as a person or as a party leader when he headed up the Conservatives. I remember having a conversation with Peter Milliken, who's one of the people who held the job longest, Liberal MP from Kingston. And I asked him what he thought of Scheer, and he said Scheer was an impeccable speaker, great rulings, stayed above the fray, did not get partisan. You cannot say that about Greg Fergus. And so the Conservatives are raising this issue. The fundraising event has been taken off the Liberal website. I think Fergus is going to be in hot water. Unfortunately, I think he's going to stay in the job because he was put in there by the Liberals to do their bidding. And he's been doing it. Greg Fergus, as I've told you before, is a guy I met when he was on school board. I thought he was a decent, honorable man. He has not performed that way as Speaker. He has been the Trudeau Liberal PMO lapdog in the Speaker's chair. And it's very disconcerting to see.
Brian, the House of Commons resumed today, and a big topic of discussion is the budget. Apparently, the budget legislation does not include the Liberals' big promise of the capital gains tax changes. Are the Liberals maybe backing away from that promise?
Kind of strange that you'd make a huge promise and then not put it in the legislation, right? So, look, for people that don't follow politics in and out to the same degree that you and I do, Hal, you present the budget, and the Liberals presented their budget on April 16th. And that's when the finance minister stands up in the House of Commons. They give a big speech. They detail what they want to do. They table the document with the House, which means that it is presented to the House. It is entered into the official record. Here's our spending plan. Here's what we're going to do. And the big promise in there that they hadn't told anybody about, they told them everything else. They didn't tell anybody about the capital gains tax, changing the inclusion rate from 50% to 66%. That's something that's going to hit small business owners, tradespeople that run their own shop, convenience store owners. You own a cottage, a cabin, chalet, whatever you want to call it. Your family owns one of those and you want to pass it down. It's going to hit you. It's going to hit doctors. It's going to hit all kinds of people. But the Trudeau Liberals try to make it sound like, oh, it's just going to hit the monopoly man with the top hat and the monocle and the uber wealthy. And if you're not the uber wealthy like Galen Weston, you don't have to worry about it. Well, that's not the case. And they've faced incredible pushback on this. So April 16th, they present their budget. May 1st, they table the legislation to enable or enact the budget measures. But the capital gains tax isn't in there. You would think maybe that might mean they're backing away from it, but so far, no, they're not. Justin Trudeau has spent the last 3 weeks after the legislation was tabled defending this. He's put out a video talking about how great the capital gains tax is, and this is fairness for every generation. It's class war, it's intergenerational economic warfare that he's playing at. All of these different factors are at play, but he seems committed to going ahead with it. But they're also concerned about the pushback from doctors, and they don't want to be responsible for a flash of retirement from doctors or doctors leaving. So they're trying to find a way to make changes, but not get the $20 billion in extra money that they're expecting and that they've already spent.
Our Prime Minister is in Philadelphia, Brian. Justin Trudeau is speaking to a business group at a North American Union conference. What's the purpose of the trip?
Tip O'Neill, the Democratic Speaker of the House back in the 80s, is famous for popularizing the term "all politics is local." So this may seem like an international trip, but it's a message for the folks back home. He's speaking to a business group, yes, but he's also speaking to the Service Employees International Union, SEIU. They're big in healthcare, especially out in the prairies. They're very big in the prairies. They're not quite as big here in Ontario or in Quebec, but BC, Alberta, Manitoba. I'm not including BC in the prairies. Don't worry, Hal. But it's a major union, and he's speaking to them to send a message not only to their members back here in Canada, but to the union, especially the public sector unions, writ large across the country. That's a big part of what this is. So he's. It might seem like an international message, but it's not. He's also, we're told, going to spend some time talking about, the possibility of a second Trump presidency. Well, if you're worried about a second Trump presidency, here is my view. Stop campaigning against Pierre Poilievre using Donald Trump, because, let's say we don't have an election in this country until October 2025. The Americans are going to have theirs come hell or high water in early November of this year. So there's a good chance Donald Trump's going to win that. You've then got 10 months after Donald Trump is sworn in before we go to the polls. Do you think Donald Trump is really going to look kindly on Canada and our request to the White House and the next Trump administration if Justin Trudeau has spent the last year bashing Pierre Poilievre, saying he's just like Donald Trump, you can't trust him? This is bad politics by Trudeau all around, but it's par for the course. It goes back to the desperation we were talking about in how they're playing up the issue of charter rights being under attack. Everything right now, when you look at the polling numbers and how bad they are, it's about desperation. It's about trying to find that, small cadre of voters that they can pull back into their own fold.
Yeah, and according to Nanos, the Tories now have, a 20-point lead over the Justin Trudeau Liberals. Brian, the federal government announced a national auto strategy on combating auto theft over the long weekend. Auto thefts continue to rise all across the country now. Isn't this something the Trudeau government mentioned before?
I don't know how many times they've mentioned it now. It's a long-standing thing in covering politics. You show up to an event and there's cabinet ministers from this government or that government or multiple governments, and you get the news release handed to you before the politicians come out and speak, and you look and you go, is this new? Wait a minute, I think I've heard this before. And sometimes governments are upfront. They do what are called echo events. They make a big announcement, but then they want to localize it. And so, the Danielle Smith government makes an announcement at the Alberta legislature in Edmonton, but then they do an event in Calgary, then they do an event in Lethbridge, then they do an event in Red Deer. Those are echo announcements. You're trying to localize it. This isn't an echo announcement, Hal. This is another national announcement that they're going to do something about auto theft. Depending on where you are in the country, it varies. British Columbia, it's quite high. Alberta, it's definitely up, but not as high as here, where auto thefts are up 300%. And the big reason is, it's twofold. One, they're being exported via the Port of Montreal. Or secondly, and this is the new thing that we all have to worry about across the country, especially if you're looking to buy a used car. Car thieves are finding ways to change the VIN number or hide the VIN number. And so it looks like you are buying a legit used car. You register it with the Department of Transportation and everything's fine, and then suddenly your car's being repossessed. This is the latest horror story that I'm hearing about. People spending $60,000 on a decent used car and then finding out that they bought something that was stolen. And they have no recourse. So all of these things are going on. But the 300% increase that I mentioned in Ontario, that's under the Trudeau government. And they've been warned about this for years now. They've been asked by Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives for more than a year to do something more, to do something concrete, including putting scanners at the Port of Montreal. Because the ones that are exported, the reason they're stealing them here is they come into the Toronto area, they steal the cars, they put them in a shipping container, or they drive them straight to Montreal, put them on a ship, and they're off to the Middle East or somewhere in Africa, and they're sold. So you got these two things going on of how the cars are gotten rid of. But auto theft is up dramatically. It's between 60 and 300%, depending on where you live in the country. That's costing all of us, higher prices for insurance, higher prices to get coverage. It's, and all of us wondering if we wake up in the morning, is the car going to be there if you've got outside parking? So this is a major issue. It's not one that they've dealt with in a serious manner. It's one they like making announcements about. But as one colleague at National Post, Chris Selly, likes to say, with the Trudeau government, the announcement is the policy, and there's no policy beyond the announcement.
Brian, we spoke not long ago about how Canada Post refused to take part in the Trudeau government's gun buyback program. Has there been any movement on this now 4-year-old promise?
No, they banned, what was it? They said at the time 1,500 different types of firearms, mostly used for sport shooters, and then they added a bunch of hunting rifles and shotguns to the list over the next couple of years. And I think I first reported on the Canada Post angle about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. Then CBC got the letter and said, "Oh, look, Canada Post has said no." Canada Post has said no. The RCMP has said no. Municipal police forces across the country have said, no, we don't have the manpower to do this. The Ontario Provincial Police, the Quebec Provincial Police, they've all said, no, we can't do this. Are you going to pay us to hire extra people to do all this? And the answer from the federal government is, of course, no. So they've got a plan to buy back guns that they never owned. So it's not really a buyback. They've got plans to continue to ban them. And yet these guns continue to sit in your basement, in the gun safe, or in your neighbor's basement in the gun safe. They're not being used in crimes, but the Trudeau Liberals continue to portray it as if you don't re-elect them, gun crime's going to break out on every street corner in the country. I'm sorry, most Canadians probably already feel like that's the case, and the Trudeau Liberal promises and halfway actions haven't really solved the issue.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.
5 candidates are vying to replace Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley. One of them is joining me today. Sarah Hoffman formerly held the positions of Health Minister and Deputy Premier during Rachel Notley's time as Premier. She's here now, and we welcome her to Bridge City News. Sarah, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jeanette.
Absolutely. Okay, so first of all, can you maybe tell our viewers why you believe that you're the best candidate for the job and what it is that makes you so different from the other candidates?
Yeah, my whole life, people have said that women like me don't belong in politics. I'm sassy, I have a bigger body, and I have a really hard time pretending to be somebody that I'm not. But I think just like they've said we don't deserve to win in Southern Alberta, we've proved them wrong, that there are lots of people who share our values right across this province. And I'm looking forward to proving them wrong in this leadership race too. I think it's important that we own our values and own who we are. And I think people like that and respond really well to it. So I've definitely got a track record of working hard and winning, and that's my plan for this leadership race as well.
Okay, and what are you hearing specifically from people in Lethbridge and Southern Alberta? Why, what are they most concerned with, Sarah?
Definitely, I've been going to Lethbridge for decades. We held a provincial council or convention there years ago. I remember it was the middle of winter and the roads were really awful. And at that time, it was a lot of the same things that people are talking to me about now. Healthcare is top of mind, especially in Lethbridge, where about half the people there don't have access to a family doctor right now. Expanding the other types of care is great, but there's no replacement for that relationship with a primary care doctor. A lot of women are having to drive down the highway to have babies. That's not okay either. So it is definitely one of the biggest issues that's raised with me. And then another big one, of course, being a university town, is the lack of support for post-secondaries. And now with Danielle Smith bringing in this bill, it's Bill 18, around wanting to stop there being outside investment from Alberta into things that she might not support, including federal funding. A lot of our university dollars come from the federal government, and we should be working to make it even stronger partnership and to bring more money in instead of chasing it away. So those are some of the top issues, along with climate change is another huge one. And not everyone says climate, but people are talking about drought and wildfires, and especially in southern Alberta, the scarcity of water. And with the current government talking about mining on the eastern slopes, that's going to impact the headwaters and the watershed that serve all of us in this province.
Mm-hmm. And now, you mentioned this right off the hop there, healthcare, and you say that Alberta needs more hospitals, obviously. So how would you go about doing that, and where would the money come from for that?
Yeah, so when I was the Minister of Health, we committed to the Calgary Cancer Centre. The UCP didn't pull the plug on that. We also committed to a new hospital in South Edmonton. The UCP has pulled the plug on that, and to expanding Red Deer as sort of the first 3 projects, and they've definitely stalled out on Red Deer. We haven't seen the kind of progress that I expected in the last 5 years. We also know that we need to expand cardiac care in Lethbridge and other acute care services. And the great news is that there's a lot of potential to be able to expand that care. So one of the things that I want to do is grow the programs from the U of A and the U of C into U of C Med School into Lethbridge. And I will give a little bit of credit to the UCP here. They have started that work, but we need to scale it up, and we need to do it quickly. When people have their practice and their residency in a community that's a positive experience, they're likely to stay there. So let's make sure we give them more opportunities to learn in Lethbridge and then be able to be those healthcare leaders that we so desperately need in Lethbridge. And where does the money come from? We all know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So this is a reasonable investment to make sure. We need 1,000 more family doctors, 1,000 more doctors in Alberta, and about 3,000 nurse practitioners or physician assistants to support them, to make sure that they are seeing the people who need their attention, and that others who have other skills can see them in that team-based environment. And we will save significantly on emergency room visits, ICU visits. When people can actually get the care in a proactive way, it's better for their personal health care, and it's also better for the expenses of the overall system. So let's keep people connected with doctors and seeing and doing preventative care instead of having to deal with more urgent cases down the road.
Mm-hmm. Now, if Alberta does get more hospitals, Sarah, and you mentioned it right there, it stands to reason that we obviously need more physicians, more nurses. So what should be done to attract and retain these health professionals?
Number one, it starts with respect. And this is another thing that sets me aside from the other candidates. I've been the health minister, and I was the health minister when we had a great working relationship with healthcare providers. It was so good, in fact, with doctors, that when we sat down to negotiate the last contract under the NDP, and we opened up the books and we were very honest about where we were at as a province, they returned their retention bonus because there wasn't a problem with retention in Alberta. We had more than enough doctors. Every major municipality, you could get a family doctor, and they trusted me to work with them to put that money back into making system improvements. So it needs to start with having a respectful relationship. And I will argue that the fastest way to do that is to bring back the person who is at the table as the health minister in the premier's chair. That, I think, would send a very strong message to healthcare providers about the kind of seriousness that Albertans take the healthcare that we all receive. And then, in terms of recruitment, BC very successfully recruited 500 doctors in the first year of having an NDP government. And part of it is that they changed some of the funding models so that people who wanted to be on a salary instead of running doctor's offices like small businesses where turnover is how you get paid. We brought in more salaried options there in British Columbia, and a lot of doctors were very keen to work in that environment where you can have deeper relationships, work with patients who have more complex needs, and not feel like you're costing yourself money by providing that longer appointment or taking more issues. So often you'll walk into an office and see only 1 or 2 issues per visit on the wall. That's because doctors are paid per visit, and that's not really fair to them. We need to make sure that the patients have the opportunity to have better care. So it can be good for doctors and it could be good for patients at the same time. And then another piece is that we have a lot of folks living in Alberta or living abroad who've been trained in other jurisdictions. And we need to bring more postgraduate opportunities here for them to use their expertise in the healthcare system, do some additional training to make sure that they meet the requirements of the various health colleges. But there are people who already live here, as well as many people who are studying internationally who would like to come back to Alberta. So let's find more opportunities for them to work in the healthcare system, show them respect, and make sure that all of us can have access to great healthcare.
Yeah, it's a big one, that's for sure, Sarah. Now, some are calling for the NDP to move more toward the political center. This is just switching gears a little bit from healthcare. So with that in mind, any thoughts on outsider but political heavyweight Naheed Nenshi being part of this race? Do you have any concerns about a change of direction for the party?
Naheed and I always have fun when we're in the same room. There's always some good laughs and interesting banter, but I want to win. I think that it's important that we have somebody who's been at the table, who's got the experience, and who can get us back on track very quickly. And I will also say that I've door knocked hundreds of thousands of doors, including doors in Lethbridge. I've been there for fundraisers. I've been there for nomination meetings for our local candidates. And what I keep hearing is that we need more bold policies. We don't need to be more cautious. We need to be more courageous. And that's what I'm offering through this leadership campaign. And I'm excited that we have lots of attention on it. And I look forward to earning the votes of every single party member I can. Now's our chance to connect with all of these existing members and new members and talk to them about what kind of vision I'm offering them. So I'm excited to do that through the debates, through one-on-one conversations and various meetings throughout the province.
Okay, awesome. Do you have any concerns, though, about a change of direction for the party?
Well, I plan on winning, so I'm excited
So
for the direction I'm bringing to the party, and a real focus on health, climate, and housing. And I think when I talk to people who live in this province, they know that we need NDP values to solve those 3 biggest crises. We can't say that the free market's going to solve housing. In fact, the free market has driven up housing costs higher here per year. The growth has been higher in Alberta, specifically in Edmonton and Calgary, than any other large city in the country. That's not okay. That's not sustainable. We need to lean into who we are as New Democrats to be able to solve those problems. So these are the kinds of solutions I'll be proposing throughout this leadership race. And I hope to earn the support of the membership and have a strong mandate to be the NDP.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and of course, besides healthcare, we all know that the housing crisis continues across Canada. And I understand that one of your proposals is to cap rent increases. So can you maybe explain how this would be implemented and how it would benefit Albertans?
Right now, the market is out of control. There's no balance in terms of supply and demand. And with so many large corporate landlords, they really do have the ability to determine how much their increases are every year because they control so much of the stock. I think it's important that we build more co-op, affordable, and social housing and make sure that while we're doing that, we put a cap on how much rents can go up. So I'm proposing what we had in a bill that the UCP just voted down yesterday, actually was 2% for the first 2 years and then cap to inflation for the next 2 years. So it's a short-term rent cap increase, but at the same time we have that in place, we need to build units all over the province. And we've done this before. Peter Lougheed brought in temporary rent caps, and he also invested in social and affordable housing. And we can use those same proven strategies that we had in the past. And then in the early 1980s, the late 70s, we were leaders in the country in terms of building housing and doing it all across the province. So it's something that we've done before. We can learn from our past, but absolutely, people right now are writing to me every day about rent increases. Some of them are as high as 30%, and that is not sustainable. And definitely their wages aren't going up 30%. So we need to take urgent action to keep people housed.
Yeah, it seems like a landlord's market these days, that's for sure. So what would you say then to landlords who might argue that a rent cap unfairly targets them and reduces their opportunity for profit and to stay ahead of the inflation rate?
This is why it's for 4 years. I want to make sure that we have 2 years at 2% and then the next 2 years at inflation. And the reason is because the market's broken right now. So it isn't typically the small landlords that are seeing these massive increases. Some of them are, but usually it's large multinational corporations that own the lion's share of our housing stock right now in the province. And we need to make sure that we have some regulations. We shouldn't shy away from solutions that involve regulating profit margins and regulating things that are essential. Housing used to be considered a human right. Making larger profits, not exactly a human right, but we need to make sure that we create an environment where people can continue to be profitable, but we need to get the supply and demand back in stock, so back in balance. So this is why we need some of these NDP values around understanding the importance of strong social programs, and housing needs to be one of those key areas. So I'm not afraid to propose it and to work with them over the long term to make sure everyone can be successful. But people are losing their homes every day in this province, and that is not okay.
Yeah. You mentioned it before. Climate change is a major platform for the Alberta NDP, but the carbon tax is highly unpopular in Alberta. So what do you see as an alternative approach to reduce carbon emissions?
Yeah, so I was part of the team that established the climate leadership plan originally, and I was convinced by all the economists in the room that the consumer-based carbon tax would be effective. It hasn't been, and you're right, it is highly unpopular. And when I talk to Albertans, they want action on climate. So we need to stop fighting about which tool, and we need to get tools that they'll be supportive of and buy into. So I'm proposing that we move towards a cap and trade model, that we make sure that we are investing in helping the public reduce their emissions and their bills, as opposed to always giving that money to large industry. Industry absolutely has a role to play in reducing emissions, and they can pay for that. But if we want people to be able to reduce their emissions, we need to give them some money up front to be able to do things like energy efficiency improvements to their homes, putting on panels, buying electric vehicles, and setting up an e-charging network throughout the province to be able to reduce people's emissions. And the other thing we really need to get public investment in as well, that's part of my climate plan, is regional transit hubs. It's important for people who might need to go from Lethbridge to Calgary for an appointment to be able to do that. And while the Red Arrow and others may have filled some of that gap, if you live half an hour outside of Lethbridge, there isn't really an option for you to be able to get to a major appointment or those types of things. So we need to get back to having more regional transit initiatives. I know I grew up in a really small community in northern Alberta, Canuso. There's only 200 people who live there. And the Greyhound used to come through each and every day, and people would be on it regularly to go to their appointments or to go shopping or to be able to access the major centers. So it's important that we have a Crown corporation that helps deliver that regional transit, and that will also help reduce emissions over the long term too. So I'm excited for us to stop fighting about the federal consumer carbon tax, which certainly was broken when they exempted the East Coast home heating options, the fuels that are used there, and didn't exempt other parts of the country. The economists acknowledge that when you break a tool, it doesn't work, and that's why I'm proposing that we move towards a cap and trade model and see some real improvement on the quality of our air, the amount of emissions. And I know industry has found ways to pull carbon from the earth, and they can also pull it from the atmosphere. So I'm excited to work with them on driving more of that innovation, but I want the lion's share of the money we make to be focused on people reducing their emissions.
Well, it looks like we're about out of time here, unfortunately, because I had a few questions left for you there. But Sarah, thanks so much for being with us today. We really appreciate having you on.
I'd love to chat again sometime, Jeanette. Sorry we didn't get to all your questions.
That's okay. Great to have you with us. Sarah Hoffman is one of 5 candidates running in the Alberta NDP leadership race. I'm Jeanette Roche. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks so much for watching.